MarketMake week 1. So I'm glad to have everybody here. This session is specifically for UMA. If you're not familiar with it, it's a way to do, well, we're going to learn exactly what it's about, but you can build synthetics on-chain. And it's a really interesting protocol. So hopefully you're here to learn. And we have Chandler de Kock with us, and he's going to be walking us through specifics. Chandler, you want to intro yourself and then dive into whatever you want to do?
Yeah, thank you very much. Also, thanks for everyone who's joining. UMA is really excited to be part of the MarketMake Hackathon. We were actually at the previous one last time, and we really enjoyed the experience. A little bit about myself. So I'm actually a fairly new member of the UMA team. My kind of role at the team is meant to try and get UMA in front of as many people as possible, as many developers, help grow the ecosystem, and kind of help make sure that we kind of push what we think is a really elegant solution to a couple of the problems that we're seeing in terms of like the whole DeFi space. So for today, quite specifically, I'll be talking on how to build financial contracts with UMA. I'll talk a little bit about our Oracle problem and how we solve it. I'll also kind of really dive into some of the aspects of what UMA's, what resources we can give to the hackers, and then a little bit about like what UMA's up to outside of just this hackathon and what you can look forward to from that perspective. This workshop's not really going to be so much of a heavy demo, although we do have some pre-recorded demos that are still really useful for anyone that wants to get into the more technical side of things, and also quite open to everyone just popping questions in the chat. I've got it up here, and we'll kind of, if I say something that draws quite an interesting question from you, please pop it into the chat, and we'll get to that as the kind of presentation comes along. I do want to let everyone know that this presentation will also not be the full hour, and so there'll be a lot of time for questions for me to also kind of point you in the right direction and kind of give some thoughts on kind of some of the questions that get asked. So without too much further ado, I'll jump right in. So at UMA, we're trying to build these priceless financial contracts with what we are calling an optimistic oracle. For those who know what UMA kind of does, you would have heard us talk about this before, but for those who haven't, it'll be quite an interesting experience for us to let you know a little bit about how that works in terms of the new, or in terms of the DeFi space in general. A little bit about the actual presentation itself. So we just went through the introductions. We'll kind of run through the risk of oracles in DeFi. Any veteran of the DeFi space would know this problem. We'll kind of introduce the idea of UMA's priceless financial contract design, and then kind of give from that point on how to work on UMA. So the resources to use, some of the processes that UMA kind of implement in its governance process, and also how you can develop on UMA. If you are looking for some help, where to go, how to go, and how to go about, solving some of the problems that you have if you get stuck somewhere. I've been at multiple hackathons myself where I just didn't know what to do next when I found a bug or couldn't figure out something out, and so the idea of that is to kind of help you guys with that. And then also some useful bits of information about the space that UMA finds itself in and what we're busy with at the moment. Then we'll also talk about prizes, and at the end of the presentation, mainly left for you to kind of ask as many questions as possible. The overall objective that I'm trying to get across is that at the end of the presentation, you should be set on your path to start developing on UMA and kind of get your hack going on along with what you want to build on UMA, or something that you're building on some other protocol at the moment, at least be somewhat inspired to build on UMA at the moment. All right, so to kind of start, the idea of DeFi always depends on what everyone's known as this corruptible oracle. This off-chain data and kind of the most heavily or the biggest weakest point on a DeFi contract is these price feeds, or this outside data source. And in most of the financial contracts that we build, whether you're building synthetics, which we kind of do most of the time at UMA, this really makes a big difference in how your contracts behave. And the idea of trusting this oracle is kind of the fundamental point of what we're trying to do at UVA and solve it. So the price feed is ultimately what many of the pricing of certain positions in certain contracts have, and also what the amount of collateral that you end up having and how your contracts behave. These price feeds typically in other smart contract implementations need like a constant stream of data to be pushed to the contracts to make sure that these contracts are solvable or solvent, and really make sure that they're of sufficient collateral or liquidity. And all it really takes is just one bad kind of oracle price, and your position is basically wrecked. It also makes it a lot more harder to build products that are quite sustainable to price fluctuations. Maybe it's a short dip, maybe it's a power outage, or a kind of an error with a price feed. Multiple of these errors can happen, and there needs to be some sort of remediation process around that. I mean, we've seen multiple examples of this in the DeFi space throughout kind of its kind of like formulation, and the idea here is to make sure that we can ensure that there is some sort of dispute resolution mechanism, or what we kind of want to term at UMA a data verification mechanism, so we can actually verify the data in a more succinct way. One of the kind of points that I alluded to was also this idea of corrupting the data source or the oracle. And I mean, oracles have always been the point of weakness, and we kind of think of it as like, what will it cost to actually corrupt this this oracle? And the notion around corrupting the oracle is there is a cost around it. So we call it the cost of corruption. So in this kind of like image that I've got here, it's a bribe to the oracle providers to kind of manipulate the data, or kind of give false data, or yeah, whatever it be, just kind of game the system in their favor. The profit from corruption is the penalty that ultimately happens as a result of that bribe, or kind of whatever the mechanism that you use. And one of the like fundamental points on what UMA is trying to do is ensure that through our dispute, our data verification mechanism and our optimistic oracle service, is that we always make sure that one inequality always holds, is that the cost of corruption will always be greater than the profit from corruption. We do this through the UMA token and the governance structure, where the oracle calls are minimized to specific disputes. I'll get into that slightly a bit in kind of a later slide, but the kind of the inequality that it's always hold is to make sure that the cost of corruption is higher than the proof of corruption. So that's all good and well. So the idea of us having oracle calls for every price dispute won't really solve the DeFi problem by having hundreds and hundreds of these kind of voting rounds on figuring out what the price of a certain price feed is. And the truth is, we don't actually even need that. 99% or even 99.9% of these of the time, these price feeds work in as intended and as they were meant to be, and aren't corrupted. And so the idea of having to call or push these feeds onto chain as often as possible is really an inefficient mechanism. And ultimately, what we've decided to kind of build on with the UMA protocol is this idea of a dispute process where someone can dispute their liquidation or an action on their contract, and it only be escalated in those occasions where clear manipulations happened. And so if a kind of to give a concrete example and how it particularly works in UMA is that if we have a contract, let's say I'm minting Y dollar with some WETH, and I've got a 1.25% collateral ratio, and I got liquidated at 1.2449999, and it was so close that it's almost negligible whether that was a valid dispute or not. And I can then dispute that, and then that will be escalated to the DMV, or the data verification mechanism, and with using the on-chain data as well as the price feed and kind of the voting structure of the UMA token holders, we can ultimately resolve whether that dispute was sufficient or not. But in terms of like the normal course of business, ultimately all the Oracle calls should be minimized to only the ones that actually have tangible value for being corrupted. The real kicker here is to kind of really minimize the Oracle usage, because the true fact is that most of the Oracle services, even though that they're not fully decentralized, operate with the idea of being a reliable source of information. So what do we mean by the idea of a priceless contract, and why do we think that that's more performant? Is that these price feeds are not the only source of information that a contract can use. It obviously uses the dispute, the data verification mechanism as a true source of data, but then there's this proxy of the price feed, meaning that ultimately the value of the contract isn't being determined by the price feed, and we then can use the DMV to resolve any issues as a result of it, actually then making the contract in itself priceless. And that's kind of where we call, why we call the idea of the UMA contracts priceless, and also why we call the data verification mechanism an optimistic oracle. It's based on the optimism that the UMA token holders vote in the best interest for keeping the contract secured in the correct way. And that ultimately forms part of like the game theoretic argument on why the cost of corruption must always be great. Sorry, the cost of corruption must always be greater than the proof of corruption. If those terms that I'm mentioning and kind of the game theoretic mechanics behind that is something that you guys are quite interested in knowing more about, happy to have that chat with anyone that's interested on our Discord. I personally find it really, really interesting to kind of go through, but I kind of breeze through that fairly quickly. So that's a little bit about like what UMA is trying to do, and so now I just want to kind of like take a second just to dive into how to work on UMA for the hack specifically, and what you can expect from the UMA team going forward. So obviously, you've got to come up with a project idea that's on you. I think the most common thing for the dev to do next is really read the docs. Kind of that's step number 2. It should actually be step number 1. I often, start with step 2 and then get the idea for the project post that, but that's really up to the team. When you get started with your project, I've always noticed that you inevitably hit a roadblock, and that's ultimately where you need some help or somebody that's a bit more familiar with the protocol and kind of piecing it together in your particular hack. And that's where you really get to chat with us. And so I'll kind of like give you some starting resources, but also if you want to have a more like direct conversation with the UMA team, like I'll kind of run through how that typically works. All right, so where to chat with us? We obviously on the ETHGlobal Discord, that's we're a sponsor on the channel, so a couple of people have been chatting with us on their ideas of their ideas on that channel. That's a really great spot. Also head to UMA's Discord. We have our very own Discord where actual developers that are developing on UMA have built their own kind of contracts and are kind of running with a lot of projects there. Also the UMA team hang out there quite a lot, so it's a very useful place to get like developer centric questions in there. And the specific channel there is the developer question. Also, if you're not so much of a developer, but you're more of an you're the ideas person, but you think that your question might make you look silly because it's very, very obvious. We also actually got you covered on that one. There's a channel there called No Stupid Questions, and that's specifically tailored to the person that thinks that their question might make them look silly. Actually, we think all questions are welcome, and ultimately, we're all got to ask one stupid question at some point. And then lastly, I think the important part for us to kind of convey to all the hackers is that we really want to help you. It's in our best interest to help you, and it's in your best interest to ask questions for us. And then ultimately the idea is to grow the ecosystem of kind of just making sure that you guys as hackers really understand what you want to build on UMA, and also what UMA can do for you guys. It's a two-way learning street kind of, and I've always really been keen to hear what ideas people come up with in these hackathons. Right, so some of the resources that are available. The doc site, as I mentioned, gets an idea on what UMA is. It's quite comprehensive, taking you through kind of the starting points of what I mentioned earlier in the chat around what UMA is trying to achieve, what we call priceless contracts, what we're calling our optimistic oracle. There is also development guides there. There's a tutorial. The tutorial we can kind of present to you in two ways. So there is a getting started tutorial with Sean. This is specifically a linked video to the previous hackathons tutorial where we went through a tech demo. I felt that was a really useful demo that's still pertinent for today. And so we can kind of use that demo as well. And I'll share, by the way, all these slides and links will be shared in the channel afterwards for anyone that's wanting to make use of these resources. Recommendation: start that video 10 minutes in. That tutorial that Sean runs through is the exact same tutorial that we have set up on our doc sites. And if you're a bit more technical and really want to get into the weeds, the GitHub channel or the GitHub repo for UMA is the place to go. All right. And things I kind of want to maybe just point people to specifically, part of this is really to make sure that you get the kind of the most in terms of the first steps into getting your hacks in a space that's quite elegant. The first one is that development guide. So the development guide starts off with a tutorial. It's very basic, getting you started with a test network where you can make use of our contracts, and also our contract templates, and also you can mint your own synthetic at the end of that tutorial, which is quite useful. It takes roughly 20 minutes to set up. If you've never done if you're hacking from a very beginner level, it might take 30 to 40 minutes, but somebody that's done this can actually even get it set up in 5 minutes. So a really great start to get done, kind of get the ball rolling from that perspective. The other one that's really important for people to kind of get their head around is how to interface with our data verification mechanism. Once you feel comfortable with the idea of how the priceless contracts work, and kind of understand conceptually what the optimistic oracle is, the data verification mechanism is actually how the optimistic oracle has been implemented. So this link here is to kind of really push you down that avenue, and how you'd actually ultimately interface with that. Well, I also added here the understanding the economics of the optimistic oracle. Why does this inequality of the cost of corruption always being greater than the proof of the profit from corruption being so fundamental to how the contracts on UMA are secured? And then also there's a list of price IDs. I'll get into what a price ID is later, but ultimately UMA's done a lot of kind of approved price IDs that people can use for the contracts or for any synthetic they want to create on us. All right. So that's kind of some of the resources that you can make use of from the hack. Again, the links will be shared, so you can kind of take the slides from today and use that. But also I kind of want to let people know about what are the processes to know for after the hack, and how do you want to work with UMA after the hack. There are some, it's not really valuable for the hack, but there are some really interesting nuances on how the DMV works with the liquidator and disputer bots. Those are designed to secure the system. I'll run into a bit more on what that means. An UMIP for price IDs, I'll run into that slightly as well. How the voting works, and like one of the things that I'm personally really excited about is the developer mining initiative at UMA. So liquidator and disputers are basically just bots that scan contracts, scan people, scan the positions in these contracts and decide based off the parameters of the contract if these contracts are liquid enough or not. And ultimately, the liquidator will then liquidate a position if it believes that that position is liquidatable, if it's below the collateralization ratio. And if it's not, then the disputer bot can then dispute that, and that if the disputer bot it has like sufficient proof, which is fairly easy to do if in the calculations, that gets escalated to the data verification mechanism, and ultimately the UMA token holders will vote on that. But the interplay between the liquidator bots and the disputer bots is fundamental to securing the contracts on the DMV. And also this interplay is what we've done to kind of minimize the number of Oracle calls in total. We also actually run, interestingly enough, purposeful liquidation opportunities on contracts. These are done for mainly two reasons. One is to test that these contracts get liquidated often enough and are actually being monitored by a bot. And we also want to incentivize more people to run bots. It's not really a very secure system if one company or the owner of the contract is the only bot runner. We need to sufficiently secure these contracts by having third parties and ultimately more people running bots on these contracts, specifically if they hold a lot of locked value in them. The UMA improvement proposal, which is what we call an UMIP, this is basically just a stock standard proposal for you to put forward to the UMA team to improve something in the ecosystem. Not really too much in terms of like brain power to think about that. The most common type of UMIP is a price feed ID. I mentioned that earlier. A price feed ID is just what you decide that your contract's price feed would be. We've got a list of approved ones already, and the UMIP process can be whatever you decide to be. Obviously, a price ID is a very standardized aspect, so that will be kind of done in a template fashion. But if you want to create something weird and wonderful, and we've had a few interesting UMIPs that come around on the UMA protocol, on whatever financial derivative that you think is going to be quite interesting, you can work with the team and kind of put forward this UMIP to have the data verification mechanism secure that contract. The process is really just a draft, a last call on the details. Once it's been finalized, it'll be put forward for a vote and then approved. Obviously, because there is a vote, there are unsuccessful states, and most of the time it's either abandoned or rejected. But most of the time, the UMIPs that are of high quality are really the only ones that pass the draft stage. Voting, this is a really important part. All the UMIPs and DMV calls are sent to UMA token holders to vote. If you are an owner of a token of a UMA token, you have the privilege of having your tokens count towards the votes that ultimately help secure the disputes and also help improve the process that governs the UMA contracts. It's done through a 2-key contract. I've added a link here for anyone that's interested in perhaps, if they have UMA tokens and are keen to start voting. I've also added here, it's a bit more of an ancillary ad, but ultimately the DMV enforces the outcome of the vote to the contract in itself. And the value of the voting tokens in in the UMA protocol is what we were calling the cost of corruption, meaning you have to own more than 51% of all UMA tokens to be able to effectively gain control of the voting structure. I see there's 2 questions on the chat around the Discord channels. I'll actually add them to the chat at the end of it. But just to kind of let those 2 people know is the channel on the ETHGlobal Discord is the UMA sponsor channel. Feel free to chat there. And then also if you go to the UMA project homepage, you'll be able to get a link to UMA's Discord. On that Discord, in developer questions is the place to ask any developer related questions. And if you have any other type of question that kind of relates to some of the stuff that I've been talking about, there is the no stupid questions part of it, which is really designed to kind of let people ask what they think might be an obvious statement, but you for the life of you can't figure that out. Cool. All right. Developer mining. I think this is part of the thing that I'm most excited to talk about today personally. If you're familiar with the DeFi space, liquidity mining has been kind of the top running way of phrasing how to get more liquidity into the DeFi space. And so we use this term to kind of just change it up and kind of find ways to attract developers. And really it's about giving them capital. So the link here is to the article that announces it. It's on our Medium channel. But ultimately what it boils down to is that we're giving away 50,000 UMA tokens weekly. I put a lowball figure of $8 per token. I think it's currently trading at around 10, but average over the lifetime of UMA, it's roughly around 8. And these go to the developers that ultimately build contracts and have these contracts secured by the DMV. This benefits us by having more developers developing it on UMA. It also increases the total locked value. That is also the key metric on how we measure the contracts that get built. And we then kind of like work with these teams to kind of get their contracts deployed in weird and wonderful ways. I've also got a link later on where you can see who some of UMA's partners are and what contracts are being secured by the DMV at the moment, and UMA's optimistic oracle. So, after looking at the slide, you kind of want to know how to get started. The Discord channel is kind of the first one. First place to kind of just pop a question saying, hey, I'm interested in developer mining. There is a specific channel on the Discord for developer mining. We normally just send you a quick Google form link that you then populate, just giving us a rough idea of what it is you're trying to build. That we kind of talk to you about it, and we really take it from there. And then we kind of do what we can to help support you in kind of getting more locked value. I really suspect that some of the ideas that are coming out of the hackathon are prime candidates for kind of this developer mining, and many of the ideas that quite a few of the teams have been chatting to me about would like really do well in terms of this kind of program that UMA's running. So we are going to be running this virtually for as long as we realistically can. Handing out the UMA token to more people also helps with the voting process that I mentioned earlier, helps decentralize the token, and also because your contract is being secured by the UMA token, there is this positive reinforcement effect from the people that are developing on UMA. Some other useful information on some of the stuff that we've been doing. Ulabs is an idea generator. Obviously, the UMA protocol obviously has to be quite thorough and kind of well executed, but the UMA team also come up with their own weird and wonderful ideas. And so we spun out this idea called Ulabs, where we created the UGAS token. What we kind of want to use this branding of this idea is an idea generator. People can come to us with their ideas. We can kind of create our ideas as well. But we really want to make sure that that process of getting those ideas into the real world works through a community focus. And so the idea of Ulabs is to kind of help generate more ideas of different types of financial products that are not just a synthetic or not just a derivative, but kind of really push the creativity on some of the interesting ideas that can happen. Some of the ideas have come out of UMA themselves. So the idea of us hedging gas, we call it UGAS. The link that I've added here really helps how to kind of like give a description of what we did to build a UGAS product. We also have a series of developer bounties. So if you enjoy kind of looking deep into our code and trying to kind of break it, we encourage that with some developer bounties. Ultimately, we don't want any more DAO hacks. We also have a series of partners. So these are some of the people that have already received developer mining rewards. They have created their own contracts and their own services on UMA. Really encourage you to go see some of their ideas. Maybe it inspires one of or two of yours. And then there's also the just like what we're gonna kind of just branding name TBD, but ultimately it's this bounties program where we want to help the community create tools that help the ecosystem. So whether it be a kind of a total value lock dashboard or a kind of dashboard of all the opportunities that are present on UMA contracts, whatever it be, but ultimately help like the community to kind of create more tools on that. We have a bounties channel on Discord where we're exploring a couple cool ideas. So if you think you can create a cool like useful tool or a script that kind of helps not just the UMA team but the kind of community in itself, we're really excited to hear about that. So feel free to pop some messages there if you're interested in kind of exploring some creative ideas. Cool. Then more specifically to the ETH the Maker MarketMake Hackathon. UMA will be awarding a $3,000 award for the best hack. It's not just UMA that will be selecting this. We'll actually be using the UMA token holders to kind of help. The UMA community members to help with this. So if you're a part of that community, feel free to vote for yourself if it's your idea. And kind of we want to make sure that the UMA community really kind of appreciate some of the cool ideas that will be generated out of this hackathon. A link to this will also come out closer to the time. I hope you got kind of a quick and reasonable overview of what UMA is trying to do. I think it's very, very focused around collaboration, community-driven approach, which is kind of really, really important for us to make sure that we acknowledge all the awesome ideas that come out of it. So kind of best place to kind of chat with us for the hack specifically would be the UMA sponsor channel. We do have two Twitter accounts, one for the UMA protocol specifically. So that's the cool things that we develop. Then also if you are a UMA token holder, you can, we have a UMA governance Twitter account, which will kind of, give you tweeted reminders to vote and let you know the outcomes of the votes. Our website's pretty, has just recently been revamped. So go check out some of the cool updated products that have launched on UMA. The doc site, kind of mentioned that a couple of times, and then GitHub is where we also kind of like spend quite a lot of our times if you're more developer centric. Just to let you kind of know a little bit about the team that you'll be chatting to on these various Discord sites, and kind of some of the support that you'll be getting. We've got Matt in our engineering team. Dave, Nick, and Chris are all engineers that kind of help build the UMA protocol. And then from the community team perspective, we have Clayton, Sean, Tom, and Henry. They kind of answer more of the questions that are designed for the idea generation, kind of bouncing ideas off people. And then for the more technically savvy, obviously the engineering team. Cool. So that's that's my kind of chat. Hope you guys took something away from that. I'd like to obviously encourage anyone to ask a bunch of questions if they have any. And yeah, really excited about being here.
Great. Yeah, that was an excellent overview. A few things that I wasn't aware of, but good to learn. Yeah, like Chandler said, there's time for questions. I don't see any new ones from the ones you've already addressed, but if anybody real quick wants to bring that up. If not, obviously the Discord is where we'll head next. If you have questions about integrating it for your project or something you can't really figure out. And I think you mentioned, Chandler, that these slides with all their links will be available. You'll put that in there.
Yeah, so I'll post this this slide deck in the sponsor channel, and I'll also share in the UMA Discord. I see a question on what's my Discord name. It's Chandler. You should see that on both the UMA sponsor group and also the UMA Discord. So nothing too fancy in terms of my name. If you can spell it like you did, you can find me on Discord. And then the next question is, could you walk through an example of the project using UMA and the value UMA added to this project? Yeah, great idea. So the degenerative finance guys really like the idea of UGAS. So I'll use UGAS as an example because it came out of Ulabs. So it'll just kind of give an overview of how this process worked. So we wanted to create a synthetic that tracked gas prices, ultimately giving the person a useful way to hedge the gas prices, so that you can kind of help with whatever you needed gas price, whatever your use case was. So we came up with a synthetic to do that, and it was kind of our idea. And because it was our first one out of Ulabs, we also did quite a lot of the development around that, and obviously it was secured by the DMV. The guys at Degenerative really liked the idea, and we then they kind of took over it and kind of adopted it. We'll kind of take control of the contracts and really run with that process. So that was one project that got used, that used the Ulabs kind of like idea incubator. Another one is synthetic Bitcoin Cash through the Mario Cash guys. And then we've got quite a few other ones. If you want anything more specific than that, I'll more than happily answer that in the Discord. Also, it's a great place to kind of also get to chat with some of the people that are actually developing on UMA. Another question around, do we have the link to the presentation? Not right now, but I'll share that link with everyone on the Discord after this. Cool.
Great. I think unless there's any last minute questions, we can probably wrap here. A few logistics things. Let's see. So this was the last sponsor workshop that we have scheduled for MarketMake. So kudos to everybody who showed up, to a bunch of them throughout the week. Hopefully they were helpful. All the recordings for any of the sessions, including this one, will be available and are currently on the ETHGlobal YouTube channel. So if you missed something or you want to go back and re-listen to a segment that you didn't quite get, you can go back at any time and catch the videos there. Tomorrow is our first feedback session. So what we do for the hackathon is we run weekly sessions where teams can come and present to, for MarketMake, we have the Aave team and a few other people. So come sign up for that session. You should have gotten an invite a few days ago. And this week is going to be idea validation. So if you haven't settled on an idea or you want feedback on the structure of your project, please come to that. It's at 10 a.m. Eastern. And that's the time we're going to stick with for the next few weeks. Next week will be, I believe, a demo feedback. And then the final week will be pitch feedback. So really great opportunity for you to get some external perspective from people who aren't your team members or other hackers. Highly recommend coming out to those. I think that should be it. Thank you, Chandler. This was really great, like I said, and you will be available in the Discord for anything that wasn't covered and any questions that need to be further discussed.
Cool. Thank you very much, guys.